When I refused to take on a mortgage for a house that wasn't mine, my dad snapped. "We put food on your table," I replied. "Raising your child doesn't give you the right to saddle them with your debt." I'm 28, and after years of balancing student debt, a car loan, and building up my credit, I was finally in a place where I felt some financial stability. Madison, my girlfriend, and I were even talking about buying a place together next year. But as I've come to learn, things can get complicated quickly, especially when family is involved. I didn't realize just how complicated until one random evening changed everything. I was scrolling on my phone, not thinking about much, when a notification from my credit tracking app popped up. A 40-point drop. I felt my stomach twist immediately. 40 points. That's huge! I'd kept my credit in good shape, always paying bills on time, not carrying too high a balance, all the basics. So, naturally, I started worrying. Had someone stolen my information? Madison glanced over from where she was working on her laptop, noticing my reaction. "What's up?" she asked, tucking a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear as she looked at me with concern. "Something's up with my credit score." "It dropped by 40 points. I muttered, my thumb hovering over the app icon, not quite ready to dive into whatever mess lay there. "Ouch," she winced. "Any weird charges? Maybe it's just a glitch." I nodded absently, already pulling up the app and scanning my accounts. No strange credit card charges, no missed payments. But then I saw it, a mortgage account I didn't recognize linked to a property I'd never heard of. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "Babe," I said, barely able to contain the anxiety bubbling up inside me. "Come look at this." Madison came over, squinting at the screen. "A mortgage for a property you don't even own." She looked back at me, her brows furrowed. "How is that even possible? That's exactly what I want to know." I got up and started pacing. There was only one explanation coming to mind, and I hated even thinking about it. But my parents, well, they've been going through a rough patch for years. Dad, 57, had been between jobs, picking up gig work here and there, but nothing stable. Mom, who's 54, worked part-time at a retail store, but that didn't bring in much either. They never liked talking about their finances, brushing off questions with vague answers about making it work. Still, I knew things were tight. Over the years, they'd hinted at needing help, but I'd never imagined it would come to something like this. I couldn't shake the suspicion, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Madison, always the rational one, suggested I give my credit card company a call. After a painfully long hold, I finally got through to someone who confirmed my worst fear. Yes, I was legally listed as a co-signer on a mortgage for my parents' house. When I hung up, my head was spinning. How had I been added to a mortgage without my permission? Weren't there legal processes, documents, signatures required? Every part of it seemed wrong. I hadn't signed anything, I hadn't agreed to anything. So how was my name even attached? I sat down feeling like my legs couldn't hold me up anymore, and Madison just squeezed my shoulder. "You need to talk to your parents. There has to be some kind of explanation." The next morning, I drove over to my parents' place, feeling a mix of anxiety and anger brewing inside me. I'd never imagined a day where I'd be facing my parents about something like this. They'd always been the ones giving me life advice, guiding me through school and my first job, and now here I was questioning whether they'd tied me to their financial mess without so much as a warning. When I arrived, my mom was sitting in the kitchen, her cup of coffee steaming as she greeted me with a warm smile. She had no idea what I was about to bring up. "Evan? You should have told us you were coming," she said, looking genuinely pleased to see me. "Want some coffee?" "No thanks, Mom. I actually need to talk to both of you." She glanced at me, her smile slipping as she seemed to pick up on my serious tone. "Of course," she murmured, calling down the hall for Dad, who joined us a few moments later. He looked surprised to see me too, and I didn't waste any time. So I got a notification about my credit score dropping. I began trying to keep my voice steady, and when I checked, I found a mortgage account I didn't recognize. It's on this house, apparently, and my name is on it. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. My mom looked at my dad, her expression suddenly thin. They both looked guilty, but neither of them spoke right away. I pressed on, unable to contain my frustration. "Did you put my name on the mortgage without telling me?" My dad cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, Evan, we were in a tough spot. We needed the mortgage to be approved, and having your name on it helped. It was for the family." "For the family," I repeated, stunned. "How does it help the family to drag my name into something that's tanking my credit?" My mom finally spoke, her voice softer than usual. "Evan, honey, we didn't think it would be a big deal. It was just a formality, just some paperwork. We didn't realize it would affect you this way. A formality. My voice rose despite myself. This isn't a minor thing. This is my credit score, my financial record. I was planning to buy a place with Madison next year, and now I have this mortgage hanging over me impacting everything. They both looked away, and I could tell they were struggling for a response. My dad looked almost defeated, while my mom's gaze stayed fixed on her coffee cup. We didn't think it would come to this, my dad finally said, his voice quiet. But it has, I snapped. And now I'm responsible for payments on a house I don't even own, a house I didn't agree to help with. My mom looked up, her eyes soft and pleading. Evan, we thought maybe now that you know, maybe you could help with the payments, just a little each month. You're doing well and we're still trying to find stability. I stared at them, barely able to process what they were saying. They hadn't just dragged me into their mortgage mess, they were now asking me to help pay for it as if it were my responsibility to clean up their financial problems just because they'd made a choice without telling me. Unbelievable, I muttered, standing up and feeling the anger throb in my chest. You didn't even think to ask me, you just assumed I'd be okay with it. My dad looked at me and I saw a flash of guilt there. We were desperate, Evan, and you're part of this family. Family doesn't trick each other like this, I replied sharply. You could have asked. Maybe I would have helped, but you took away my choice, and now I'm tied to this whether I like it or not. They had no response, just guilty, downcast eyes that couldn't meet mine. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. I'd come here hoping for an explanation, maybe even an apology. But now I was leaving with the sinking realization that my own parents had not only dragged me into their financial mess, they were expecting me to fix it. Without another word, I walked out feeling more confused and betrayed than I ever thought possible. As I drove home, a million thoughts swirled in my head. How could they have done this, and where did that leave me? I drove around the block a few times, not ready to head home. My emotions were all over the place: anger, frustration, sadness. I felt utterly betrayed, like I didn't even know my own parents anymore. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make sense of what they'd done. Maybe, just maybe, I'd missed something. Maybe there was some reason that would make this all okay, or at least understandable. By the time I made it back to my apartment, Madison was sitting on the couch, nervously scrolling through her phone. She looked up as soon as I walked in, her expression softening when she saw the look on my face. How did it go? She asked, already guessing the answer from my slumped shoulders. I dropped onto the couch beside her, running a hand over my face. They admitted it. They put my name on the mortgage without telling me, just to get approved, and now they're hoping I'll help with the payments. Madison's face tightened, her eyes flashing with anger. They're expecting you to pay for their mortgage. Just like that, I nodded, feeling the weight of it all bearing down on me. They said it was for the family, like somehow that justifies putting my financial future at risk without even asking me. Evan, that's beyond manipulative. I get that they're struggling, but they had no right to pull you into it like this. Yeah, tell me about it. I let out a heavy sigh, leaning back against the couch. I want to help them. They're my parents, and I know they're going through a hard time, but the way they went about it, I don't even know if I can trust them anymore. Madison took my hand, her voice gentle but firm. You need to go back and make it clear that you're not okay with this. They need to understand that this isn't just paperwork. This is your life too. As much as I dreaded another confrontation, I knew she was right. The situation felt like a trap, one that I'd been pushed into without a choice. I had to make my boundaries clear, even if it meant creating a rift between us. The next day, I texted my parents telling them I wanted to talk again. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop nearby, and I felt a pang of relief not having to go back to the house. Maybe in a neutral place they'd understand how serious this was for me. But as soon as they sat down across from me, I could tell they were already defensive. Paula offered a half-hearted smile. Evan, we're sorry if we upset you yesterday. We didn't mean to stress you out. It's more than just stress. Mom, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. This is a massive financial commitment that you signed me up for without my consent. Do you understand what that means for me? My credit is already taking a hit. My dad. Rick waved a hand dismissively. We were going to explain it to you eventually. We didn't think you'd take it this way. Didn't think I'd take it this way? My voice was rising and I struggled to keep it down. Dad, you took away my choice. You made a decision that affects my financial future without even asking me if I was okay with it. How would you expect me to take that? Paula jumped in, her voice soft, almost pleading. Evan, honey, we did it because we were desperate. The mortgage was going to fall through without your name on it. We thought it was just paperwork, that it wouldn't affect you. Just paperwork. I could barely keep the frustration out of my tone. It's not just paperwork when I'm responsible for making payments if you miss them. Do you realize this could impact my ability to buy a home in the future? Rick looked away, his jaw tightening. You're doing fine, Evan. You're making good money, and we assumed it wouldn't be a big deal for you to help out with the payments if we needed it. I felt like I was in some surreal nightmare, like they weren't really hearing me. But you never asked if I'd be willing to help. You just decided that I'd be okay with it because what? Because I have a good job. That doesn't give you the right to make this decision for me. Paula leaned forward, trying to reach for my hand across the table, but I pulled back. Her face fell, but she pressed on. Evan, it was for family security. We didn't want to lose the house. We raised you here. It's your home too. Is it though? I shot back, my voice strained. Because it doesn't feel like home right now. It feels like a financial trap that I never signed up for. My parents looked at each other, their expressions a mix of guilt and frustration. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of remorse in my mom's eyes, but then my dad spoke up, his voice firm. We did what we had to do to keep this family together. We thought you'd understand that. I felt my patience snap. Understand? What, that you're using me to fix your problems, that you didn't care enough to ask if I was okay with it? Paula's voice turned defensive. Evan, we're your parents. We've done so much for you over the years. It's not unreasonable to expect a little help in return. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd always known my parents had a different view on family obligations, but this was on another level. They seemed to think that because they'd raised me, I was somehow indebted to them forever, even to the point of sacrificing my own financial security. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Look, I get that things are hard. I understand that you were desperate, but this isn't fair. You can't just assume I'll pay for something I didn't agree to, especially when it's affecting my credit. Rick sighed, leaning back and crossing his arms. What's done is done, Evan. It's not like we can just take your name off the mortgage now. It's legally binding. And that's exactly the problem, I said, my voice growing colder. You made a decision that legally binds me without giving me any say in it, and now you're acting like it's my responsibility to help you with the payments. They both went silent, neither one willing to admit they'd done anything wrong. The betrayal I felt grew heavier, sitting like a stone in my chest. I'd come here hoping they'd apologize, that they'd see how unfair this was. Instead, they seemed to think they'd done nothing wrong, that I was somehow overreacting for not wanting to be financially responsible for their choices. Finally, my mom spoke, her tone softened but still defensive. We're sorry if it hurt you, Evan, but you have to understand, we were thinking of the family as a whole. And now that it's done, maybe you can just help us, just until we're back on our feet. There it was again, the assumption that I'd help, that I'd just fall in line with their plan without a fight. They weren't even asking, really. They were expecting it. I can't believe this, I said, feeling more hurt than I wanted to admit. You're treating me like some backup plan, like I'm just supposed to fix things when you mess up. Paula tried to smile, but it came off more as a grimace. We're not asking you to fix everything just to be there for us like family is supposed to. Being family doesn't mean sacrificing my future for your mistakes, I said, standing up. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to jeopardize that because you decided to go behind my back. I left them sitting there, too shocked to stop me as I walked out. As I got into my car, I could feel the weight of what had just happened settle over me. This wasn't just about the mortgage anymore. It was about trust. Trust that felt shattered beyond repair. I drove away feeling like I was leaving a part of myself behind. My parents had always been the people I turned to, the ones I trusted without question. Now I wasn't even sure I knew who they were, and the worst part was that they didn't seem to think they'd done anything wrong. The drive home felt endless. The sting of my parents' betrayal was still fresh, gnawing at me in waves, but alongside the anger, I felt something heavier, an overwhelming sense of helplessness. This was my family, the people I trusted most. I couldn't just cut them off, but I also couldn't let them ruin my future. Somehow I'd been backed into a corner, and every way out seemed to lead to more complications, more heartbreak. When I walked into the apartment, Madison was waiting. She stood up as soon as she saw me, concern etched into every line of her face. She wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight as if to pull me back to reality. "How'd it go?" she asked, even though she could probably tell just from looking at me. I let out a sigh and dropped onto the couch, running a hand through my hair. They're acting like I'm overreacting. They keep saying it was for family security, that they just assumed I'd help out since we're family. They don't get how serious this is. Madison sat beside me, reaching for my hand. They don't seem to care how this affects you. It's like they're just expecting you to accept it, no questions asked. Exactly. I said, feeling my frustration boil up again. They don't even see it as a betrayal. They're acting like it's normal, like it's just what families do. Madison shook her head, her face set in a hard line. Evan, this is beyond taking advantage. They didn't even give you a choice. They could have asked and you might have helped, but they didn't. They took that choice away from you and just assumed you'd be okay with it. I leaned back, closing my eyes and trying to process everything. I don't know what to do, Madison. They're my parents. I don't want to ruin our relationship, but at the same time, I can't ignore what they've done. If I just go along with it, who's to say they won't keep asking for more? Maybe ruining the relationship isn't your responsibility here, she said quietly. You're not the one who lied and dragged someone else into their debt. They did that. And honestly, it sounds like they're not going to stop unless you set some serious boundaries. I knew she was right, but hearing it said out loud felt like a punch to the gut. Family had always been a big part of my life, and while my parents and I had our ups and downs, I'd always believed they had my best interests at heart. Now I didn't even know what to believe. Madison reached over and squeezed my hand. I know this is hard, but you can't let them guilt you into this. You've worked so hard to build your credit, your career. None of that should be sacrificed because they made some bad choices. The weight of her words settled over me, and I knew I needed to get some professional advice. I had to find out what my options were legally and financially. I'd been pulled into a situation that wasn't my choice, and if there was any way to get out, I needed to know. The next day, I made an appointment with a financial advisor, hoping he'd have some answers. I arrived at his office with a pit in my stomach, feeling like I was preparing for more bad news. The advisor, Mark, was a patient middle-aged man who listened carefully as I explained the situation, nodding along as I laid out every painful detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful but serious. This is a tough situation, Evan. Legally speaking, since your name is on the mortgage, you're partially responsible for the debt. Your parents likely added you as a cosigner, which is why they were able to secure the loan. That means the lender can hold you accountable if payments are missed. I swallowed hard, the reality of it sinking in even deeper. Is there any way to get my name off the mortgage? I didn't agree to this, and it's already affecting my credit. He sighed, tapping his pen on the desk. There are a few options, but they're not simple. The most straightforward route would be for your parents to refinance the mortgage in their own names, but that would require them to qualify on their own, which sounds like it could be difficult given their financial situation. I nodded. The weight of it all pressed down on me. I'd already figured refinancing would be an issue. My parents were barely scraping by, which was probably why they dragged me into this mess in the first place. If refinancing isn't an option, he continued, you could try negotiating with the lender to see if they'd consider removing your name. But it's unlikely without a legal reason. Unfortunately, because you're legally tied to this mortgage, walking away isn't simple. So I'm basically trapped. I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. Mark's expression softened. I wouldn't say trapped, but it's a complicated situation. You could try talking to your parents about refinancing or making sure they pay their share on time, but ultimately, they need to cooperate. I felt the sinking realization that even with professional advice, I was still stuck unless my parents were willing to make changes. And after our last conversation, I doubted they'd be willing to take on the payments alone. Mark must have sensed my despair because he added, "It's not fair that you were put in this position, Evan. You have the right to set boundaries here. If they're unwilling to make changes, then you have to consider what's best for your financial future." I thanked him, left his office, and sat in my car for a while staring out the windshield, feeling more trapped than ever. The only solution required my parents to willingly shoulder the payments on their own, something they didn't seem capable of doing. And that left me with the painful choice of either stepping in to help them pay off this mortgage or risking my credit and future. I went home exhausted and collapsed onto the couch. Madison sat beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. What did the advisor say? I explained everything, laying out how my legal ties to the mortgage meant that for now, I was just as responsible for the payments as my parents were. Madison's eyes widened and she shook her head. This is insane. They put you in a situation you can't even walk away from. Yeah, I muttered, bitterness creeping into my voice. I'm stuck unless they either refinance or pay it themselves, and neither of those seems likely. She sighed, her brow furrowing as she thought it over. So are you just supposed to keep paying, hoping they don't miss a payment and hurt your credit more? Pretty much, I said, rubbing my temples. And if they keep expecting me to pitch in, this could go on for years. This isn't just a one-time payment. This could tie me down financially for the rest of their mortgage. Madison looked furious. Evan, you can't let them keep doing this to you. They're taking advantage of you whether they realize it or not. You're not responsible for their choices. I know, I replied, feeling the tension in my shoulders, but they don't see it that way. They think I'm overreacting, that it's my duty to help them keep the house. I'm their son, so they assume I'll just fall in line. She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with worry. What are you going to do? I wished I had an answer, but all I could do was shake my head. I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to cut them off, but they're my parents. I can't just abandon them, even if I'm furious with them. It feels like I'm stuck no matter what. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the situation settling over both of us. I felt torn between my loyalty to my parents and my need to protect myself. I knew Madison was right. I couldn't let them keep pulling me into their financial mess. But at the same time, turning my back on them felt impossible. It was like I was standing at a crossroads with no good choices in sight. No matter which path I took, someone would get hurt, and as much as I wanted to believe I could somehow fix this without ruining my relationship with my parents, I knew deep down that it might be a choice between my future and theirs. The more I thought about it, the more trapped I felt. After the meeting with the financial advisor, I spent a few days agonizing over what to do. Madison kept urging me to put my foot down with my parents to make it clear that I couldn't just keep bailing them out. But every time I thought about having that conversation, my chest tightened. I'd never been good at setting boundaries with my parents. They'd always had a way of making me feel guilty, like I was the one letting them down whenever I pushed back. Still, I couldn't avoid the conversation forever. I knew that if I didn't confront them again, I'd be stuck paying for a mortgage that wasn't mine, a debt that could hold me back for years. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my right to choose my own future. I called them and asked to meet at their house again. As I drove over, I tried to prepare myself for the confrontation, rehearsing the words in my head, but by the time I pulled into their driveway, my hands were shaking. I could already feel the weight of their disappointment and frustration pressing down on me, and I hadn't even walked through the door yet. Inside, my parents were waiting for me in the living room. Paula was folding laundry, her movements stiff and tense. Rick sat in his recliner flipping through the television channels, but he switched it off when I came in. There was a heaviness in the air, like we all knew this conversation was going to be a turning point. "So what did you want to talk about, Evan?" my mom asked, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. I spoke to a financial advisor. He explained that because my name is on the mortgage, I'm legally tied to the payments, and if I don't keep up with them, my credit takes the hit. Rick nodded, crossing his arms. "We figured that. But like we said, we assumed you'd be able to help considering how well you're doing." I swallowed the rising anger in my throat. "That's the problem, Dad. You assumed I'd be okay with it. You didn't ask me if I was willing to put my name on the mortgage. You just did it, and now you're expecting me to pay for it." Paula put down the laundry basket and looked at me, her expression a mix of guilt and frustration. "Evan, we didn't know what else to do. You know how hard things have been for us. We thought we'd have more time before you even noticed, but, well, here we are. And now I'm stuck," I said, my voice wavering as I tried to keep my emotions in check. "So I'm asking you to refinance the mortgage and take my name off it. Or at the very least, you need to start paying your share without expecting me to cover for you. I can't keep doing this. It's ruining my credit, my plans, everything." They exchanged a look, and I saw the frustration flare in my dad's eyes. "You think it's that simple, Evan? Do you have any idea what the bank would say if we tried to refinance? We barely qualified with your name on the loan. Without it, we wouldn't stand a chance, and you know that." "I know it's not simple," I shot back, my voice rising despite myself, "but it's not fair for you to expect me to keep paying without even trying to find another solution. I'm trying to build a life for myself. Madison and I are planning to buy a place, and this is making that impossible." My mom's face crumpled and she sank into a chair, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. "Evan, we didn't mean for it to turn out like this. We were just trying to keep the house. This place means everything to us. We thought you'd understand." "I do understand," I said, and I meant it. I understood their desperation, their fear of losing the home they'd worked so hard for. But understanding didn't make it right. "But you didn't give me a choice. You made a decision that's affecting my whole life, and now you're acting like I'm the bad guy for not wanting to go along with it." Rick stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You're acting like we did this to hurt you, Evan. We're your parents. We've done so much for you, and now when we need a little help, you're ready to walk away." His words stung and I felt my own anger flare up. This isn't about helping Dad. It's about you putting me in a situation without my permission and expecting me to just deal with it. That's not fair and you know it. Paula's eyes filled with tears and she shook her head. We thought you'd be more supportive, Evan. We thought you'd understand that sometimes family has to make sacrifices for each other. But I guess we were wrong. Her words hit me like a slap. I'd always been the dutiful son, the one who tried to keep the peace, who never said no. And now here I was trying to draw a line and they were acting like I was betraying them. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the anger and the sense of betrayal that they'd never seen me as an equal in this decision. I stood up, feeling my hands tremble. I have made sacrifices for you. I've helped you whenever I could. But this is too much. I need you to at least try to take my name off the mortgage. If you don't, then I'll have to look into legal options. They both stared at me, stunned into silence. I don't think they'd ever imagined I'd go that far. My dad's face went red and he jabbed a finger toward the door. If that's how you feel, then maybe you should leave, Evan. If you're so eager to turn your back on your family, then go ahead. My mom started crying, burying her face in her hands, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it almost doubled me over. But I forced myself to stand my ground to remember why I was doing this. I couldn't let them keep manipulating me. Maybe I will, I said, my voice breaking, but I'm not going to ruin my future, because you made a mistake. I love you both, but I can't do this anymore. I turned and walked out the door, feeling like my heart was tearing itself apart. I could hear my mom sobbing behind me, could feel my dad's furious glare burning into my back. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but as I got into my car and drove away, I knew there was no turning back now. The next night, I barely slept, haunted by the memory of my mom's tears and my dad's accusations. Madison did her best to comfort me, but even she couldn't erase the guilt that clawed at my insides. I kept wondering if I'd made the right choice, if I should have just accepted it and kept helping them, even if it meant sacrificing my own dreams. But then I'd think about all the times they'd taken advantage of my willingness to help, all the times they'd pushed me into doing things their way, and the anger would flare up again. I wasn't just angry at them, I was angry at myself too for letting it get this far, for not speaking up sooner. I got a call from my mom a few days later, but I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was shaky, pleading with me to reconsider, saying that they couldn't do this without me, that the house would be taken away if I didn't help. She kept saying that they were family, that I shouldn't abandon them now, after everything they'd done for me. But I knew that helping them now wouldn't just be a one-time thing. It would be a long-term commitment that could drag on for years, keeping me trapped in a situation I never asked for. And as much as I hated the thought of hurting them, I couldn't ignore what it was doing to my own life. Madison held my hand as we listened to the message together, her face sad but resolute. You did what you had to do, Evan. You can't keep sacrificing your future for their mistakes. I nodded, but my chest felt like it was caving in. I'd made my decision, but the consequences were far more painful than I'd imagined. My relationship with my parents was shattered, and I had no idea if it would ever be the same again. And as much as I tried to tell myself that it was their fault that they pushed me into this, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just lost something I could never get back. I never thought it would come to this. The idea of taking legal action against my own parents felt like something out of a bad dream. But as the days passed, it became painfully clear that they weren't willing to change, and I couldn't keep letting them dictate my future. They'd crossed a line, and as much as it hurt, I had to take back control of my life. With Madison's encouragement, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family financial disputes. Just making the call was gut-wrenching. I kept thinking about how angry and disappointed my parents would be when they found out, but the thought of being financially trapped for years, unable to make my own choices, pushed me forward. The lawyer, a patient and understanding woman named Karen, listened as I explained everything. When I finished, she leaned forward, her face sympathetic but firm. Evan, I know this is difficult, but you're doing the right thing by seeking help. Your parents had no right to put you on the mortgage without your permission, and there are legal steps we can take to protect your interests. She explained that I could file a petition to have my name removed from the mortgage due to lack of consent. It wouldn't be easy, she warned, as it would likely involve court proceedings and a lot of back and forth with my parents, but it was possible. And if successful, it would free me from any future financial responsibility for the house. Hearing those words was like a lifeline, but the relief was mixed with dread. Taking my parents to court felt like a betrayal, like I was crossing a line that could never be undone. I told Karen I needed some time to think it over, and she nodded understanding. But I knew I didn't really have a choice. If I wanted my life back, I'd have to go through with it. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. My parents were furious when they found out. They called and left countless messages alternating between begging and accusing, trying to make me feel like the worst son on the planet. My dad especially was relentless, calling me ungrateful and telling me that I was turning my back on my family. One voicemail still sticks with me. His voice was full of hurt and anger as he said, "Evan, after everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to your mother? I hope you're happy with yourself." Listening to that message felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to explain my side to make them understand that this wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about the life I was trying to build. But every time I tried to reach out, they just doubled down, telling me how selfish I was for even considering taking legal action. Madison was a rock through it all. She sat with me as I drafted the court documents, reminding me why I was doing this whenever I started to doubt myself. "You're not a bad son, Evan," she said firmly one night when I was on the verge of breaking down. "You're a grown man who deserves to make his own choices. They put you in this position, not the other way around." Her words were a comfort, but the emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I was grieving, like I was losing a part of myself I could never get back. The anger I'd felt had simmered into a deep sadness, a sense of loss that was hard to shake. These were my parents, the people who'd raised me, whom I trusted all my life, and now I was fighting them in court. The legal process was as grueling as Karen had warned. My parents contested every step, refusing to acknowledge that what they'd done was wrong. They painted me as the villain, accusing me of being heartless, of putting my selfish goals above family. Their lawyer even tried to argue that I'd verbally agreed to help them, which was absurd, but it still stung to hear them twisting the truth to suit their narrative. Every court appearance felt like a confrontation, a reminder of just how far apart we'd grown. My parents wouldn't even look at me. Their faces hardened with anger and hurt. I wanted to reach out to make them understand, but they'd already decided that I was in the wrong, and I knew that no matter the outcome, things would never go back to the way they were. After months of back and forth, the judge finally ruled in my favor. It was a surreal moment, one that should have felt like a victory, but left me feeling hollow. I was free from the mortgage, no longer legally tied to my parents' house, but the cost had been far greater than I'd anticipated. My parents didn't speak to me for weeks after the ruling. When I called to try and explain, to tell them that I'd only done what I felt was necessary, they wouldn't answer. Eventually, my mom left a message, her voice cold and distant. "We understand your decision, Evan, but don't expect us to forget what you did. Family is supposed to be there for each other, and you made it clear where your priorities lie." That message broke something in me. I'd spent so much time hoping that once this was all over, we could find a way to rebuild, to understand each other. But now I realized that my parents would probably never see my side. To them, I was the son who had abandoned them when they needed me most. Madison was supportive, but even she could see how much it was affecting me. She suggested I see a therapist to help process everything, and reluctantly I agreed. Talking to someone helped me work through the guilt and pain, to see that I wasn't responsible for my parents' choices. The therapist helped me understand that I had the right to set boundaries, that I wasn't a bad person for wanting to protect my future. But even with that clarity, the pain lingered. The holidays came and went, and while Madison's family welcomed me with open arms, it wasn't the same. I kept thinking about how I'd usually spend Thanksgiving with my parents, how we'd watch football together and laugh over old family stories. Now those memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. In the end, I knew I'd made the right decision. I was free from the financial trap they'd set, able to move forward with Madison and build the life we dreamed of. But the cost was steep, and I often wondered if there could have been another way, some path that would have let me keep both my freedom and my family. As time went on, the pain dulled, but it never disappeared. I kept hoping that one day my parents would reach out, that they'd be willing to talk and maybe even try to understand. But until that day came, I had to accept that I'd chosen my future over their expectations, and that sometimes even the right choices come with consequences that never really go away.